Dr. Alea Barron. I am the Director of Client Relations at Barron Family Law, which is a family law firm. My sister is a family law attorney, and we have this amazing law firm together. She's the owner and CEO. I'm the Director of Client Relations, and we mostly focus on child custody, divorce, domestic violence, and then all sorts of trust, wills and estate planning, as well as premarital consulting and prenuptial agreements or postnuptial agreements. Those are all the rage in Hollywood right now as well. And then a little bit of background on that as well as me is I have my doctorate in psychology and my master's in marriage and family therapy from Pepperdine, which is right in Malibu. You talked about Beverly Hills earlier, so right next door neighbors to that. And from there, I was a therapist, and that wasn't just the best fit for me. So now I do family law, and it is that best of blend of both worlds where there's all this problem solving in the family law, but also that emotionality and supportive that I give to our clients.
So perfect. So take us through the genesis. How did you initially get started in this area and why?
Sure. So probably like any good therapist story, my parents got divorced. And we use that as our kitschy little tagline, my sister and I, that our family is here to protect yours. Our parents' divorce was pretty brutal. And it inspired us not only to go into the law, but psychology and try to make it hopefully a better experience, not only for our clients, but really with emphasis on the kiddos and helping parents to see that while the divorce process is very traumatic in general, but it really has a big impact on the kids. And if you can be really psychologically mindful about the process, it will lend itself to the children and better outcomes and better relationships long-term, because you're likely going to be in the room when the kids are going to prom or graduating college. And you're going to want to be there for those big moments and have both parents share in the joy of that. And it certainly makes it more difficult when parents can't be in the same room.
I know for me, when I started my journey, it was similar. It was like, I just want to be different than my parents, even though as I got older, I kind of appreciated them a little bit more. But as a kid, I thought these were like two monsters of people, right? I'm like, I want this, I want that, and I wasn't getting it. But what I found is that they were good people, and maybe their approach wasn't the best, but the effort was there.
Mm-hmm.
And I wish that I had the foresight to understand that talking to someone was going to be helpful instead of me bottling it in. And I think that was more of like my man pride, right? Where like, I'm a man, I can't show any weakness. But it left me in a situation where thankfully I didn't roam the streets like a lot of young people do. And I just was able to figure it out. And I use them as like my motivation. I said, I'm going to be better than my mother and my father. Let me tell you something, Alea. I made sure everything was better. If they played one sport, I played two. If they got B's or A's, I got A pluses, right? So when you're pushing through and understanding where you wanted to be, where did you pull your motivation and inspiration and from?
Yeah, that is an awesome question. And I don't know that I have been asked that recently, but I think a lot just came from this desire to want to show them I was the best version of myself. And I think along the way, maybe that initially it was like to prove, like most kids want to prove like they're good enough for their parents' love and that their parents are going to love them no matter what. And I guess maybe I didn't always feel that that was just a given, that I was just going to be loved because I'm me. I think that I felt that I needed to prove that along the way. And I think eventually it became intrinsic as part of my desire to like give back to the community and give back professionally. And part of, I think, the pride I just hold in within myself is knowing that I'm a good person, that like most things I do are like to make others feel the same way I wanted to feel as a kid, like loved unconditionally, feel that empathic joy and encouragement from someone who really loves you. So I think there is a lot of like that historical component, like you were talking about with you and your family and your parents, but that now like kind of keeps me focused and motivated moving forward as well. Like it's like part of that pushes you to just want to grow and be better, especially when you see like the impact you're making in others' lives.
Did you think that you would end up exactly where you are today, or was this a little bit of doubt because, as you mentioned, you're trying to pull that inspiration and figure it all out as we got older?
No, I definitely had no idea I would be here today. I think when I was a kid, like every kid, I wanted to be a veterinarian or an astronaut. And then from there, I wanted to figure everything out about the world. I just wanted to help others. And maybe in a sense, that was like, so I didn't have to explore my own experience, right? If you're constantly helping other people, you don't have to take that look at yourself and explore your own trauma or your own grief or your own personal issues, right? Because it's so focused outward. And I think I did that for a long time. And then, of course, I went and got my degree in psychology, which helped me reflect on that for myself as I was giving back. And then it was very fluid. I remember my aunt had said, "Oh, your sister's getting, she's going to be a lawyer and you're getting your master's and doctorate in psychology. You guys should really do something with that together." And I thought, oh no, I'm going to be a neuropsychologist. I'm going to study the brain. And she was going to do something completely different. And then, I don't know, probably 7 years later, it looped back around and the timing was just right. And now we are working, together to be that supportive, collaborative team for our clients. But certainly there was never a plan for that. And I'm wondering about your plan. Like, was your plan to be the host of this amazing Behind the Shades show?
Yes. No, I'm joking. well, my plan, to be honest, I just I wanted to make a difference and I didn't know how I was going to do that. So in my teens, I turned to something that was very familiar, and that was religion. And I began to give talks in front of at the time I was a Christian. I decided to give talks in front of the church and the congregation. And I know a lot of people say, oh my God, public speaking is such a big fear. But my biggest fear, let me share with you, Alea, was making sure I didn't trip going up those steps in front of all those people. Because no matter what you deliver at that point in time, it's like, well, yeah, that Bible reading was good terrain, but we saw you fall. So when I learned how to do that and I was able to overcome that and command that presence, because there is nothing potentially more powerful than speaking from the heart to those who are loving what you're hearing, especially from the good book. And then I stopped for a minute and then I needed to do something that I could pay the bills with. So I got into the banking industry, but my love was always speaking to people. And then when we had the lockdowns, I was like, Tareen, you're given another opportunity. You're given one with the church, you're given two through the banking industry, and now you're giving a third. And I was like, I have to answer this call to action from whomever it's coming from, for those who are religious, from God, from me internally. And that's how I started this podcast. And I look back at all the guests, yourself included, and it's truly amazing how many people will tell their story, and all you have to do is ask and put a microphone in front of their face. So that's how I got involved in it.
Okay, that is, I think, also very inspirational because it wasn't a plan and you just did it. And now here you are. I mean, I think that takes a lot of courage, but also that dedication and drive. I think, like we were just referencing, that it's something that's internal and then sometimes also that's learned. And you can also train yourself. Like if you want to start a podcast, like you could go and do it if that was something that was motivating to you.
Yes, I agree. And I think what sometimes happens, unfortunately, is we let affordability and income get in the way of our passion, because passion is a lot different than purpose. So passion could be that, Alea, your passion from our conversation is that you want to make the world a better place than how you entered it, right? And that's my passion too, but we go about it two different ways. Our purpose is something else. It could be our purpose to do this to pay our bills. It could be our purpose to do something else. Our purpose is more of the thinking and the logical aspect, where our passion is what's in our heart, what's in our soul. And when I hear how you're helping people, relationships are so difficult. There's some relationships I failed at, there's some relationships I succeeded at, but overall, I think I have a passing grade on my overall experience. I hope so, anyways, right? Don't speak to my exes here, but but when you look at how you want to help people with their relationships, are you pulling from your own personal experience or is it something else?
Yeah, I think that there is like a variety, right? I think in the legal world where I'm working with the law clients, and part of my role is to do the case management and case conceptualization, but a lot of time I'm doing damage control, like talking with the parents who are going through so much and the kiddos are going through a lot and they're trying to balance work and life and their ex partner, and you'd be having a new partner and all the emotions that are coming from just so many changes all at once, right? And maybe a change that they weren't expecting or ready for, and it kind of got dropped on them. So also that lack of control and the grief around just losing themselves and having to find themselves and who they thought they were, but now that role is changing and it can happen so fast, right? So part of my role is to jump in there and be able to have the conversation that is coming up for them that may not necessarily be like in a legal context, right? They're not asking for legal advice. They're not saying, okay, like what's the next step for my divorce? But it's really like, oh my gosh, like how am I going to get through the next day, the next week till my next court hearing? How do I support my children? How do I help my children understand what's going on, not that they have to go to two houses? So I come in and really kind of do that supportive role around, okay, where are you? Like, what supports do you need? And then how do we get you from this place of feeling out of control and grieving to a place where you feel emotionally capable of sitting down with your kiddo and saying, like, I can't talk to you about the court case, right? Because that's not what this is about. This is about, two parents that love their children or child. And how do we get that parent to not be crying, to not show that emotion, so that way the kiddos don't blame themselves, right? Because so many kids think if their parents don't work out, it's something they did, and that they need to fix their parents. So it's really getting parents into that place where they can be emotionally available to be a good parent and co-parent to that child. So that way there isn't so much animosity. And hopefully, the kiddos, come out confident and they can see that both parents love them. So that is a lot of the role and the dynamic that I play here. And I think that helps facilitate, these stronger dynamics for the relationships. And I think our clients feel that we truly care about them as humans, as opposed to just like another like legal case along like the legal, court hearing and just the case calendar.
Do you find that difficult to balance that to areas where you want to make sure that they feel nurtured and respected and they're cared for, but as well as there's that legal aspect where you're trying to balance between both?
Sure, right. Well, every, client wants to feel like their case is the most, important as far as like they're going to win. And I think, in family law, especially, it's like who's losing less, because it's so much of this balancing act, how the assets are being divided, where the children are going to be. And I do think that the balance, like at least for us in the way we work at our law firm, is we have the attorney, or we have a couple of attorneys, and we have the paralegals, and their role really is to focus on those legal aspects. And that is the focus, is to make sure that people feel that their case in the court is being addressed and the legal ramifications are, and their legal rights are being upheld to the highest extent. And it's like that both and they're getting that support where they know that the decisions they're making are based in the context of like what is in their long-term best interest, not just like right now, like, oh, are you going to win this settlement? But what are the emotional ramifications as well? How do you get through this as unscathed as possible, right? Because it's very traumatic usually for everyone, especially if it's going to court. As an aside, we do very peaceful private out of court settlements for divorces and child custody, where parents are coming just to make sure their paperwork is done right. But those aren't the ones that are making the newspaper headlines, right? Like the people that are getting along aren't really going to court, that are having so much of the drama, if you will. And then there's always the factor that, sometimes one or both parties have a mental health or substance use issue, which is why it's getting so out of hand and why people aren't necessarily taking all of the steps they can to be the most healthy in these dynamics. So it's kind of helpful to come in, especially in domestic violence scenarios or these high conflict custody cases where, usually there's more going on than just the case itself. And I'm sure you're curious about that since that's a big part of your role.
I am, and that's why I have so many questions, but I want to narrow it down. So I guess my first question is, how does someone protect themselves from being quote unquote taken to the cleaners when there's that separation period between two people and it ends up in court?
Sure. And I think like taken to the cleaners can mean so much depending on if you're, and I am guessing you're kind of talking about that financial aspect. And I think that's really tough because every state has a different law around how you could divide assets and debts. And I'm not super familiar with the Canadian laws. But I imagine, you have to really try ahead of time to be aware of the finances. Like if you don't know, if you think that you might be going through a divorce, or really just like for one's own sense of autonomy and understanding of who they are and where they are in a relationship, to have that ownership over their finances and knowing what the familial finances are, I think is really helpful. Because if you don't know what's there, you don't also know what's being hidden. And it certainly takes a lot of money to unearth hidden finances if they are being hidden. So I would encourage anyone, if they don't have ownership or access to the finances, to maybe start to be curious about that and why that is, and kind of get in there to, be on the credit cards, know what the taxes are, know what the tax returns are, make sure that you're signing the paperwork. We see people that have never signed their tax return, been married for 5 or 10 years. And those are things that should be signed by both parties. So whether or not their signature is being forged, or they just thought the other person was taking care of it, to really take ownership and, access your own finances, because that is where people really get snookered, is when they don't know.
For those who are watching on Facebook, YouTube, and my website, please subscribe, share, and like for more incredible interviews like the one we have with my new best friend, Alea. And we will be back for more. So stay tuned, everyone.